This conference will now be recorded.
Now we're live, all right.
Well done, Steve.
It's 6:08. I'll call the Village and Town of Cottage Grove Joint Fire District Commission meeting to order. Like I said, it's 6:08. Meeting was properly posted in the town, as was in the village. And we do have a quorum. Mr. Duplay will be late. And we don't have, oh, I see, we're okay. The order of the agenda is a little bit out of whack here, so normally the next thing I would say would be approval of the minutes, but that's down a ways. Public appearances, public's opportunity to speak about any subject that is not a specific agenda item. You just hanging out?
For the fun.
Okay. All right. Item number 4, discuss and consider the minutes from the April 28th, 2025 meeting.
Murphy would make a motion to approve the minutes.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Motion and a second to approve the April 28th meeting minutes. Any question? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign, motion carried.
I guess I have to abstain because I wasn't here.
Okay,
Right.
yep. Next item, chief's report.
All right, we're sitting at 40 staff right now. It's 11 officers, 3 operators, 24 firefighters, and 2 probationary members. Department was at 139 calls on May 21st. We've gone up a couple since then, averaging out about 0.98 calls per day. If we were to continue, we'd be about 357 calls at the end of the year. Call breakdown is 12 mutual aid, 65 calls in the village, 21 in Pleasant Springs, and 41 in the town of Cottage Grove. For the apparatus info, engine 4 had an air leak on the air brake system, but one of our members is a heavy diesel mechanic, so he fixed it in-house. We had our annual hose testing on May 22nd. There are just a couple hoses that failed, but nothing major. They'll be replaced with the normal budget. And the damaged combi tool finally came back. It's been gone since September. So, May training is residential fire responses for municipal water supply. So in the village, we'll be doing hot drills. June training will be for all about the festival. And the extra training we'll just do, we kind of do water fights, which is more of a fun activity after the festival. Department lost 1 member in May due to inactivity. He wasn't coming to training or calls, so he was removed. The 94th Annual Firemen's Festival will be June 12th through the 15th. We created 2 new positions, one as a chaplain, which we have 1 new member already to serve in that role. And the second is a fire explorer for 16 and 17-year-olds interested in joining the fire service. I've recruited 1 member for that position as well. Myself and Assistant Chief Hammond met with Cameron and Kim to discuss the future building and department needs. Staff milestones, myself with 18 years, April with 24, Kevin Laufenberg with 18, Christian Murphy with 2 years, and Lance Severson with 24 years.
That's it. Okay. Next item, discuss and consider length of service / retirement awards.
So this was brought up a couple of years ago or a year ago as like a recruitment and retention tool. There's a packet in there that kind of breaks down what the estimated cost would be, or kind of some examples of what the estimated cost would be. in that meeting with Cameron and Kim, that was one thing we talked about, maybe bringing back up to the forefront about trying to recruit members and trying to get people to stay on the department. I think you're kind of in here to talk about that a little bit, right?
Yeah, I can talk about it. So further on your agenda, you'll see a preliminary model of what an on-pay, on-call model could look like for the village and the town. In talking with Kim and Nick, one of the things that we felt was important was to both reward and incentivize our volunteers who have served on the fire department these years. So 2 years ago, we did an initial cost estimate about what that would be. I don't have those numbers in front of me tonight, but the reason why it's being brought up is before we kind of go forward on the on-pay, we would like to kind of go back and try to at least potentially start this going forward, if not go back and credit all the years of service that these volunteers have given. What's great about this program, April put a good memo together, but the state actually contributes, they have a matching contribution to what we fund. So not only are we putting funds in, the state's matching towards this retirement length of service award. So it's even more of a bang for your bucks for this program. This program wouldn't be a significant dollar amount going forward. The first year, if we go back and cover the years of service that the roster has, it would be an investment, but again, something that both, I think the village and town should at least consider in their budget process. As part of that process, because of the shifts in valuation for the town and village, we would have to talk about what formula would that look like? Would there just be a set formula that we could both agree on? Or would we actually go back every year and figure out the percentage? Probably easier to probably find a compromise percentage for the cost of service. So just really wanted to bring it back to you guys as a budgetary discussion item and possible give Nick and April some direction for the budget timeframe. So if that is something the fire commission is interested in doing, they would bring it back as part of the budget process. And then both the village and town would get that about what that would look like on their share.
So is that matching retroactive? So it's talking about one option is to go back previous years of service, so there's a big chunk. Does that get matched by the state?
Yep.
Okay. And this length of service award is more like a retirement thing, like a payout when you leave, or
Payout when you reach retirement age.
when you reach retirement age? So it's kind of like a little kicker for retirement, is
Yeah.
kind of what it is.
And obviously, it doesn't break out to be a ton of money, but it's something, it's something to, I guess, to help.
Yeah, I think with
kick
this,
it, I guess, a little bit.
I think the fact that, the way that the state's willing to fund, it's a really easy way to provide a financial
The
incentive.
fact the state matches makes it a little more attractive, but
Is the
Well, just up to $390.
what would we put in what's the annual contribution per volunteer? 150? So you're requesting 150 for the past years and then 300 for future years, is that? So they would match the 300 then, right?
So with 10-year vesting,
Yeah. Yeah, so 3 years, so for the future, she's saying, April worked on a lot of this, so for the future, it would be $300 per person, and then the state would match 300 per person.
And we're estimating that to cost the district 13,500 per year.
Approximately, yeah.
And then what you were saying,
We could also explore going retroactive. And so I apologize. I wasn't sure how detailed we were going in on the agenda tonight. I had worked out roughly what that would be 2 years ago.
She's got it broken down right now. She's estimating approximately 75,000 to 80,000. And she's actually proposing taking some of that all of it from Pleasant Springs Fund for the capital fund.
What is in that fund?
I have to ask him what the actual balance is, but I think right now there's a significant amount in there.
So it could cover that, so it wouldn't impact.
But we've also been using that fund to pay for any new equipment.
Mhm.
So with your new ladder truck coming up, it's gonna be $2+ million.
Correct.
Mhm. Yeah, you can't spend it more than once.
And I think a big thing here too is, this is really for direction for Nick for budget. I think we do need to work out what, maybe at the next meeting, we could get you some exact numbers, how it could affect both municipalities. But just something, we won't want to have or recommend something in the budget without having some thought.
I guess too, I'd like to see the parameters as far as what makes a person eligible. In other words, just by virtue of the fact of just being on the fire department, that shouldn't automatically go ahead and make you eligible to go ahead and get that. I mean, it's participatory, training wise, I did.
Can you guys hear me okay? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
There's requirements through Horton and VFIS on the eligibility requirements for the LOSA. So Horton sets that up, and a lot of times it's either based on a point system or specific requirements and specifications that we set up with Horton. So they'll lay that all out, dependent on whether it's a certain call percentage they're making or training percentage they're making, but it's all based on a points system in most cases. So that's all something that's worked out through VFIS and the agency that we're doing the retirement program through.
I guess for me also, I guess I'd want to see,
They have some packets and
exactly
information on that.
are before, it's not, I'm gonna go on record here, I'm not against it, however, let's see what parameters are and, everybody on this commission will have an opinion whether or not they agree with all the points in what Horton provides, and, I just want to see the particulars first.
So
And
I think going forward, we could get VFIS's information for what they consider somebody in compliance. And we could actually sit down with Cameron and try to figure out a more solid number and bring them back to the committee at the next meeting. I think like Cameron said, we're just trying to get kind of a feel for if municipalities had any interest in it before we went through further steps, I guess is what we're kind of looking at.
I think it's a good idea for retention and.
Yeah, I do too. I
Yeah,
mean,
I think
at
it's
a
a great
minimum, I
idea.
think we should be doing it moving forward, given the
Yeah.
match.
Yeah.
It's certainly a retention tool. The question is the bogey for the catch-up is pretty big. I mean, that's obviously a bigger question. And you were talking about how it gets split up. The operating funds is pretty clear. It's based on equalized value, right? So why would this be any different?
Because I think in some cases you're talking about going back almost 17 years. So would we actually do the math for each year that it was, or would there be a compromise on, can we meet somewhere in the middle?
You're talking about the back. I'm
Yeah.
talking about forward. I mean, to me,
Yeah,
that
forward
we gotta
going
do that. The
forward
question
makes
is, do we
sense, yeah.
do the catch-up?
I would be for the catch-up.
I would too. I mean,
Yeah.
it gets more complicated and it's obviously much harder to fund.
Yeah, I would like to see what the numbers look like.
Yes.
Definitely.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think more information would be.
Cameron, one of the benefits to using the Pleasant Springs Fund would be a benefit to using the Pleasant Springs funds to cover the retroactive years. You wouldn't necessarily need to worry about trying to figure out the breakdown if we utilize the Pleasant Springs funds, which can be used for this purpose.
Thank you, April. I wasn't 100% sure what the Pleasant Spring Funds was, so I'll take your word on that.
I guess to clarify that question too, so we've had a service agreement with Pleasant Springs for, I think roughly 2008, 2009 is when that started. And typically what happens is they pay us a yearly sum. It's around 60 to 65,000 depending on the
62, I
year.
think it was.
That money all goes into a capital fund account that can only be used for fire department purchases. So the joint fire committee oversees that fund, so you guys approve the funds. So the fire department usually will come to you guys with a suggestion on what we'd like to use some of that funds for. You guys vote whether to approve it or not, and then it gets paid from that fund rather than the municipalities. So the history of that fund, the first 5-year agreement purchased all of Engine 4. The second 5-year agreement bought all the SCBA's and compressors. Then the last one paid for the brush truck, and now it's been saving for a while. So there's some in there. I don't know what the exact number is right now. I'd have to ask Kim Bannigan. She keeps a line item for that. But I know it's more than what, it's a lot more than what we're asking for right now. So, but so we don't have to.
I guess too, I'd want to see
Good to know.
what the exact wording of that agreement is, whether being paid to individuals, versus stuff, for equipment and so on and so forth, whether or not that's allowable or if it's even addressed. If it's silent on it, that's one thing.
Sure.
Give us, so, yeah, we just definitely have to review the
Yeah.
the agreement.
You have a copy of it, Cameron?
Yeah.
Anything else?
So that's a discuss and consider, so we're looking for more information in terms
More
of,
information.
more information on what those funds from
Yep.
Pleasant Springs could be used for, and then more information on eligibility. Was that the 2 follow-ups?
I guess that, and I guess I would just entertain a motion to table until next month's meeting with all the other things that you said. So
So moved.
Second.
motion by Duplay, second by, who made it?
Murphy.
Oh, hello. Motion is second to table till the June meeting. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Give me a second here. All right, next item. Discuss and consider restricted access to Knox box keys.
Okay, so there's a memo about that in the packet. For those that don't know, a Knox box is the key box that holds the building keys. Fire department has a master key that opens the box. Building owner puts their keys in there. We can open it, gain access to the building in an emergency. So we don't have to break a door or anything like that. Currently, fire, EMS, and police department have access to it. It's a fire department program. It's run by the fire department. We're technically the owners of the keys. And it's followed in 314, which is a fire standard. We're at, well, I guess what we're looking to do, currently there's a key in every squad car in the village. And we're kind of running into some problems with what the keys are being used for, what's happening. I guess an example would be like we had a structure fire at one of the buildings, and before we got there, police department made access into the building. Department had smoke rolling out of the door, and the officer went into the apartment with no protective gear on, no training. So we're running into situations like that. I've had conversations with Chief Gary, and it's kind of not really getting any better. So we're looking to take the keys back, or at least limit it to maybe one for the supervisor car, the sergeant car. We did some research with surrounding communities. Monona, does not allow the PD to have any access to the key boxes. Stoughton, the only department that does have access is the fire department. They're considering adding it for EMS. Sun Prairie, it's only the fire department and the supervisor has a key.
What about the town's sheriff's department?
They don't even want a key. They don't want to make entry without us doing it. So they do not have a key. The fire department itself, the only people that have access to the keys are the fire officers. So we have 40 members. There's only 11 people in the department that have access to those keys. So going forward, we're looking to take the keys back. And I guess before we just abruptly did that, figured we'd bring it here and discuss it.
So what purpose does it have for the police department to have a key?
So,
I mean, why do they have them in the first place? Because this is the first community I've ever seen that's had it. I mean, I deal with Middleton quite a
I
bit.
think it was just like an agreement back when we first got the boxes that like they could make entry and help out to try and reduce incidents for the fire department. But
Right, but you just said that
Bad decision.
a bad decision
Right.
made by the police
right.
officer.
And I'm not trying to bash the fire department.
No, I'm not.
By any means.
They're trying to help, but
They're
again.
trying to
they set
help.
them-
I have a little additional history on that. Back in the day, when the Knox boxes first started coming into being, we had, we'll take 510 West Lawn. Familiar with that healthy, wealthy old folks home? That's what we've always called it. Anyway, and there was a couple other facilities like that where EMS would have a call there, the building's locked down. The Knox box was our only source for the PD to get us into the building, for us to go ahead and do our thing. And then I think it just over the years morphed. Every time there was additional boxes, more keys, and yeah, I mean, that's how it started off, pretty innocently,
Mhm.
but
But EMS has keys, right?
you know,
Yes,
They do now.
we do know, we didn't at the time.
Okay.
That's why we had,
But I think that's important, Steve, right?
yeah.
So EMS has keys and we don't have, EMS is using the keys to get to patients, like on medical calls that we're not called on. They're using it to gain access to the building to make patient care, so they don't have to call us. In the event, like, the common one is down here at the corner, 107. It's a senior living, but it's not assisted.
Mhm.
So what happens sometimes is you get incidents in there, and to get into the building, you need to have a key. So they use the Knox box to get into the building to get to patients if they can't come to the door, kind of thing, which we don't have a problem with. That's what that's for. The problem we are running into, like I said, is when you have a real emergency situation and people are in a building where they shouldn't, people should be out of the building, not going into the building, you know, especially without training or equipment or.
Did you have the conversation with Chief Gary about having the key?
A while ago, we haven't had the conversation about taking the keys away, but we've had the conversation a few times about, you know, why did this, you know, like when specific incidents happen, be like, this is what happened, why did this happen? Do we not have this happen? And it's still happening, so.
I spoke with I messaged with Chief Gary today about it, and he was surprised to hear that this was under consideration. And I don't know if it sounds like you've tried different avenues, but in an emergency, I mean, we do have police officers where it takes time to turn out the fire crew to get to an emergency if there's an active shooter situation or some situation. I mean, of course, you can break into the building, you know, get in through other means, but you know, I don't.
That would, I guess that would
kind
be
of-
the one scenario where that would make sense, an active shooter, that would make sense. I agree, that would be one where it would be justified using it.
But the Knox box was created under the NFPA primarily for fire access.
Correct.
That's why it's there, right?
Correct.
Fire and EMS.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, like I said, it wouldn't be, I personally wouldn't be opposed to, say the supervisor having it in the sergeant's car. There's a sergeant for every shift. think that's a fair compromise because the sergeants have more experience. They know
When not to.
when to go in, when not to go in. You know, also, I mean, realistically, for the active shooters, police now all have Helligans in their vehicle for forcing entry. So if they wanted to, they could force entry. I don't know if you would have to, but like I said, we're bringing this here first so we could talk about it before we just we're just doing this kind of thing.
I like the idea of the sergeant having only the key because it sounds more like unintended consequence of all the police having the key.
I would agree with that.
And then we could revisit if there's continual problem, or maybe there's more collaboration and training for our staff on when to not go, or then just reserve them.
And it's not all emergency situations. Like the example I used today, we had a fire alarm, which it's a place where we've had fire alarms many times. We knew it was going to probably be nothing. So police department got there first, used the Knox box to get into the building, took the keys into the building, and locked us out of the building.
That's a problem.
So we get there and we can't get into the
That's
building.
That's not a good.
So I mean, that's happened a couple times now. And they've been minor, not really major calls, but like,
Thankfully.
you know,
But you need to get in when you're there.
I mean, the point is so we don't break anything. And then if we gotta, you know,
Wait 2 hours.
Right, and, the intention is to, if there's someone in danger, that they're there to help, so,
Right.
yeah, it seems like there's some protocols that could be better.
I think at a minimum, it should only be the supervisor on staff, in my opinion. I mean, I'm fine it almost seems like maybe if you're okay with that, Nick, that you talk with Chief Gary and say, and I don't want to speak for the board here, but that we need to restrict access because of these things, and you've talked to him before, it's got to go to the supervisor level, and we'll see how it goes. But if you run into more problems, we'll have to revisit it. I don't know if there's
I just, like I said, I come from a little bit more of law enforcement because my dad was chief of police for so many years, but boy, I really have a problem with all the officers having keys.
I agree with that. I'm talking just the
No.
supervisor on duty. That's it.
I know, but
Okay.
I'm really disturbed by the fact that they even had this one incident.
I agree with you.
It's really troubling to me.
okay, well, we'll just start at the supervisor level.
Are you comfortable with the supervisor only, or you think
Well,
we should?
yeah, I mean, but there's a reason why our sheriff's deputies don't want these keys.
Exactly.
That's got to be taken into consideration too.
When the NFPA created this program, it wasn't intended for law enforcement to have
No.
access. It was not.
It was not.
Do
I
you
think
want to,
There's some studies out there, and April maybe could speak up a little bit more because she's read a lot of them, but there's a lot of departments that are writing initiatives to not have that because of the conflict for, say, the Fourth Amendment. Police departments using the key. Is there a conflict with the Fourth Amendment because now they've entered a premises that maybe they don't have proper authorization to do for. So like in an emergency, structure fire, the fire department's entering the building. We don't need a warrant because it's implied consent. Does the
But you don't-
implied consent
but-
work for police department or not? I don't know. There's studies on that, and like I said,
Where
April
you start,
kind of read a little bit more of them, but
where you start wrestling around with, infringing on people's rights. That's where I have a serious problem.
Yeah, that's a good point.
so I think as long as you guys are okay with it, we start with the sergeant key. The sergeant car has a key. See how that goes. If it gets better, then realistically, in an incident like that, an ASM or any serious one, the sergeant will be responding anyways. So, and they have Helligans too if they really need to get in immediately. So,
we will need to take formal action on this. It's discuss and consider. Before I entertain a motion, is there any, and I'm just throwing it out there, I don't have an opinion necessarily one way or the other. Do you want to, if it goes as I'm thinking it may go, do you want to try it for a year to see and revisit it?
At least, yeah.
To see if Nick has positive comments, negative comments? That, I'm just throwing that out there. If,
I think we definitely should revisit it.
I was gonna
Excuse
bring
me.
that up. Thank you. I was thinking 6 months, but I don't know if that would be
I-
enough time.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Nick, what do you think? 6
Yeah.
months, is that?
Is that,
Yeah, we could try 6 months, see how it
Okay.
goes. Before you guys vote too, like April has highlighted in these, the village has an ordinance talking about Knox boxes, so there may be a need to address that ordinance to reflect whatever changes we're making, so just to consider that before, I don't want you to be surprised at the end of it.
and I will take a look at the towns also and verify.
Yeah, like I said, the sheriffs don't have a key right now.
No, but if we've got an Xbox ordinance, I just
Yeah.
rather just take a look at it just to make sure that there's not gonna be any potential conflicts.
Sure.
Yeah, I think Jess helped us. He was on the ordinance review committee with me
Yeah.
when we crafted this ordinance, with the update to the ordinance.
That refers to Knox box access.
All right, I guess I would entertain a motion.
I would make the motion that we restrict access to Knox box keys to the sergeant's vehicle, supervisor's vehicle, at Cottage Grove Police Department,
And then re-examine it.
and re-examine policy in 6 months.
Second that.
Motion and a second to restrict access to the Knox box keys to the supervisor vehicles for the Cottage Grove Police Department with the intention of revisiting it in 6 months. All right, yeah. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Discuss and consider facility needs / location planning to be in combination with Deer Grove EMS.
So this is that memo that's out there, it's the one that's got the 2025 to 2035 capital budget, building needs and planning. So, like I said, April and I met with Kim and Cameron a couple weeks ago to talk about the building itself, repairs that need to be done, looking for a capital budget for the building, and I guess while we were discussing that, I think we've mentioned it a few times in here that there needs to be a broader look at what's best for the district as a whole. Like, is there a need for another fire station? Is there a need for a remodel at the current station? And I think the answers to those questions are more complicated than something that myself or Chief Lang can just say, yeah, we need this, or no, we don't need this. So I think we're looking to have a study done on the growth of the district, what the needs are to properly meet the growing needs of the department or the district itself, and what's the best solution to achieve those. I said, so there's a pretty long list here of stuff that needs to be done. I think this is part where you guys wanted to talk about having more of a planning spend rather than the account.
Yeah, I guess if the floor is mine. So part of this plan was to kind of look at what, the building is nearing its 30 years. So a lot of things are in that building are it's time to either make an investment in replacing, remodeling, and also identifying what are the future needs. I know EMS specifically references, possibly a third ambulance or starting to phase in a third ambulance by 2029. There's also no places for fire to spend the night, or given eventually that may be the need. So part of this is to just start to outline what a possible 10-year plan could look like, as well as just making sure that the commission is well aware of things that are upcoming, that are relatively significant. So I will just caveat it that some of the price, like the $3 to $6 million potential satellite station or remodel, is likely probably low, given that there was a $6 million estimate when the village was investigating a satellite station in 2025 dollars. So that's really just identifying that a plan is going to have to be implemented eventually, and it's not going to be a cheap plan.
That's just for one vehicle, correct?
Nope, that's just for that 3 to 6 million is what that's in the plan. 20 is either a satellite facility or a remodel to the existing emergency service building.
So there was a study done in 2022, right?
Yeah, so
The
that
man had
was,
sent it forward a copy. I haven't had a chance to read it.
so that was the PAA study.
What?
It's PA, we call it the PAA study because it was done by a company, the initials are PAA. I can't remember what it stands for. But unfortunately with that, there wasn't a lot of guidance as to like, it said there eventually you may need another fire station, and eventually you may need to remodel the current station, but it didn't kind of establish anything that said, when do you need to do that, or why do you need to do that? And if you're gonna do that, where would be the best place to do that? It was more of a study of like the current staffing of the department, what would, on the fire side at least, it was like, what's the current makeup of the fire department? What are your responses like if, and then they set guidelines for like, if your response times start approaching this, you should consider hiring staff because now you're not meeting the NFPA standards. So far, we've been meeting the standards, but as the communities continue to grow and as call for service continues to grow, it gets harder to meet those standards with an all-volunteer service, which is, and that's a future agenda, or another agenda item that we're talking about, paid for call coming up. But like I said, as it grows, it starts to be a lot for volunteer service, and there's got to be planning for. I think if we're trying to get ahead of it is what we're trying to do. Like rather than spring on, suddenly the fire department can't do this and you have no warning. Like we're trying to put it on the radar kind of early, so it's like. Maybe we should start considering this now before it becomes a serious problem. So.
Yeah, with the growth, to combine services with the village, to head more north, like over past the railroad tracks would make sense rather than remodel what's here.
I mean, that's what we would have to look at.
Yeah.
I would think that with the growth to the north, northwest, northeast, that you would need another station somewhere north of the railroad.
And, I know this is just, we're brainstorming, but what about a combination of, I look at McFarland and they seem to really have made it work with police and fire all in one. And I know this is more than just this conversation right now because that entails the village too.
I mean, that'd be.
Was that looked at when the police station was, because that was before my time. That was looked at to have a joint facility.
I think we start to talk about the magnitude of cost for a building that size. On top of that, a police station might not necessarily need to be in the location of a fire and EMS building, just based off of where other resources are and where you're calling. And that's where, really we would want to rely on somebody to come in and study it and understand, okay, based off of planned neighborhood and development in various areas, are we putting a facility in a location that makes sense, not only to serve fire, but to EMS, and with future growth in mind. I do want to mention that the PAA study also calls out that if a second station is built, it is likely going to be almost solely funded by the village. And so if we're talking, when we studied that satellite station was a $6 million in 2025 costs. So we could potentially be looking at a relatively significant asset when the asset needs to be built. And currently, just talking with both chiefs in the general area where we'd like to build this or think a station would work, we don't currently own that land. So that's certainly another conversation that needs to be had too.
Where are you talking about?
Kind of over by Ridge Road area, and
Oh, that's pretty far east.
Yeah.
northeast.
What
That's
about
awful
Sandpiper and Cottage Grove Road? There's that, right by that apartment, there's a lot of
No,
land
that
there.
can't be built.
No?
It's too low.
Yeah.
But how far, so as far as response times, how far north are you gonna be out of response? Right now, Amazon's within your response time, right? That's as far north as you'd go.
Yeah, I mean, that's, response time too includes your turnout time. So turnout time is the time it takes for the fire department to respond to the station, get the truck en route.
Okay.
So
And how does Amazon compare on that metric?
it's gonna be tight to get there right now.
What makes sense for you and that you guys work there every day? What would make sense?
That's where, like I said, that's where having a study to decide where the best place would be. Like, I don't wanna say build it over here
Mhm.
and then like we build it there and then that's really not the best spot based. And we're kind of running into this headwind here where like, so what the fire department needs is a little bit different than what Deer Grove needs because the fire department doesn't take care of Deerfield. So ours, a station for us, Ridge Road, I don't know if that's appropriate for the fire department because that's far to the east, like you said, like, that's more towards Deerfield. That'd be a good one for Deer Grove because they service Deerfield, it'd be between the two districts. But for us, we're just going north and south and we're going to Pleasant Springs. So is it the best spot for us? We met with the ISO guy the other day, which they look at where your stations are. And I think where the current station is, they actually like where the current station is for the ISO study. But like I said, as you continue to grow north and west, it's going to start pushing that boundaries further and further.
And you also can't forget that Pleasant Springs is part of this whole agreement.
Correct. Yeah. And that's where this station is, benefits Pleasant Springs. So.
I think that it's good that we're starting to talk about this now because project this size, like the village, if we're contributing the most fund, like we need to have that in our plan. So I would support, taking beginning steps to gather information for a study, but I don't know how early we are in,
I think that's a good idea too, Heidi.
So
You're gonna have to solicit
realistically,
RFPs, for the study
if
and costs.
realistically, if you want to hit a 2030 deadline, you got to be starting pretty much right now.
Right now.
Because it takes time to do your RFP to get the bids. Then once they get the bid, then it's going to take time to do the study. And then once you get the study, then you have to plan for your funding and get an engineer, architect, all that stuff. So if 2030 is the deadline, then this has got to start
Started
like
yesterday.
pretty much now.
So you've got it in the budget for 26. Is that too late?
I think
That's the soonest you could do a study.
That's the
I mean,
soonest,
'cause
you're right.
I think it's relevant for each board to take back this conversation to the board and have a discussion as overall, and possibly come back, talking about how you want to handle this process. ultimately who's going to be responsible for the contract and how that's going to be administered.
So you had a number of 50 to 100 grand. Did you have?
It's probably high.
Yeah, it seems high. I don't know if there was any consultant that gave you a
No, that
ballpark.
was just
for
a
it.
rough guess because that's, yeah, I was gonna say that does seem kind of
These
high.
undesignated funds, that's right about everything that we got.
What's that?
Undesignated funds right now, $50,000 to $100,000.
Hmm.
We're right, we got $75,000 in there, roughly.
This is, I guess the goal is to like give you guys time to plan and come up with solutions. I guess I can't stop the communities from growing.
No, I'm not,
So that's-
I'm not saying any of that. I'm just saying that, this is, and I agree that we need to look at this, but if the whole thing was to find a reason for us to have that fund, this and that roof repair, and, I mean, that's like everything that we can have by 2027.
Sure.
Well, I think we should take it back to the village board and discuss it sooner than later and come back here.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
I personally, we're gonna need to do a study. The question is, do we put together an RFP right away? I mean, to me, we should get going on it. The question is how we divvy up the funds, how it gets funded is a totally separate conversation from what's it gonna cost? And who would be the one that would do it?
Can I add something?
Yes, go ahead.
So the study that we had in front of us for EMS with WPPI for Sun Prairie cost them $30,000.
To do that study.
Correct. So just as a point of reference. And then
It's a good number.
WPPI already has, because Nick, didn't you meet with them as well and provide them data? Even though it's not reflected in the report, but they already have our data.
Yeah,
So
we gave them our annual report because they had our response times and they had some of the stuff, and then never really heard back from them after that.
So we have beginning of information then.
So this is a discuss and consider? What is this? It is.
We get two choices, as far as I'm concerned. We can just by consensus agree to take it back to our individual boards for future discussion. We put this back on the agenda for next month.
Mhm.
Or you could make a formal motion saying that, we're gonna take it back to individual boards and then we'll come back with hopefully an answer for next month.
Well, I'm just thinking out loud here in terms of the discuss and consider at each board what that looks like. I mean, I don't know if we got enough information. Clearly, we don't know what we don't know. We need to go figure that out, and that's where the study comes in. Right now, we don't know what it costs. It could be 50 to 100, it could be 35. To me, it's like we need to have an RFP put together, and I don't know who would do that. I don't know if Nick, that's something you would do, or you would need help from somebody. We need to put an RFP together and get a bid. Now, maybe we want to take it to the boards and kind of get some consensus. We're going to do that, Steve. Maybe that's what we're
Yeah,
looking
'cause
for
I
our
mean-
boards.
Correct.
Okay.
The village commissioned the last one for EMS,
And we weren't involved.
and
We pay for
it was,
the fire one, and the EMS was split.
what's that?
EMS was split. Village paid for the fire.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I guess we could figure out what cost sharing is going to be, not tonight, but at our next meeting, once we figure out a direction that we're going to go. And then Can either one of you find out who commissioned the last study, or strike that? Who put together the RFP for the previous study?
The village did.
Huh?
The village did. Pretty sure
Cameron,
Matt,
who did it? Yeah.
sure Matt did it. I think.
I'm just wondering who.
Well, because the town wasn't involved in the PAA study.
Yeah, I'm
Pretty
fairly
sure
certain
that
the
was
village
Matt.
was.
We don't know who did it.
A person's name?
JJ?
Oh, it would have been Matt. It would have been Matt.
Yeah, okay.
I could probably pull up my email and figure it out, but I don't have that open in front of me.
I wasn't-
Right.
I didn't get those emails, so I don't have.
So I would imagine like an agenda point in the next board meeting for us would be just discuss future facility needs for fire and EMS. I think that captures what we would need to come back.
With to hear and discuss it, yeah.
Mhm.
I think so too, but not delay it. Do this pretty quickly.
So we want to get alignment that that the village put together an RFP that would be reviewed. I'm not quite clear on what we're gonna ask our village board for, other than, hey,
I guess for me, I'm sorry, I didn't mean.
no, go ahead.
I guess prior to sending out the RFP, if the village is gonna compose one, I'd certainly like to see it before it goes out.
Yes,
Um,
yes,
Especially seeing we're gonna be on the hook for some of this.
yes, that's
Um,
fair.
May I interject a moment?
Leads me into my next question. How ready do we want to be for next month? To approve the RFP so it goes out? So, I mean, I have the draft of the RFP at our next meeting, and if we like it collectively, it goes out right away.
I think you bring it back to both boards.
Yes,
Right, but we're gonna have that prior to our meeting, because we got two, obviously, it's not gonna be for the first town board meeting, but certainly by the second town and village meeting, you should have a copy of an RFP put together by then for the town and village boards to go ahead and look at. And if the town and village boards pass it on, then we could take a look at it at our next meeting. I mean, I'm not saying we just wait, we get the first crack at it. We'll let the boards do, because they're the ones that are gonna be writing the check.
yeah, that's fair.
Think that's something that could happen?
Mhm.
I don't know how your village works for those kinds of things, so I don't know if that's enough lead time or.
That would be my concern, is that enough lead time, but, we're talking about putting an RFP together to do a study, so it's pretty high level, so I don't anticipate it taking a lot of time, but again, I don't know staff-wise, Cameron, who or how quickly it can be done.
It's not like they're necessarily gonna have to reinvent the whole wheel. I'm sure they could get something from the previous one that's probably,
Good starting point.
yeah, I would say.
Just expand on facilities more rather than the other pieces. That's really the missing part.
Yeah, Nick has good numbers too, so.
Can we as a board correct the village administrator to put together an RFP? I don't know if that's within our purview or not.
I mean, I think we can take it back, since we commissioned that other study, that we can take it back to our board, discuss and consider having the village put together an RFP for the joint fire and EMS facility requirements to be reviewed by both boards.
At our June meeting, we just wanna,
Yes,
so I just think we need to put a timeline on it for,
June Fire Commission meeting, correct?
correct, what did I say? Did I say EMS?
No, you just said A commission.
Oh, sorry,
so you guys have 2 meetings before the next fire, and so do we, right?
yes,
Because we meet on the 2nd, the 16th, and we meet back here on the 20th.
correct, and we do the 2nd and 16th also. So that's like 2 weeks. So
Then
we
your
have-
next Deer Grove fire would be the 23rd, correct? Or is it the 30th?
The 30th, I thought.
The
You mean the
30th?
fourth
Fourth,
Monday,
the second,
right?
23rd, right?
That's the fourth week.
You're right, April.
So do we have a motion?
This is kind of a split motion, right? So I mean, I could make a motion that we take this back individually to our boards, that the plan is to put an RFP together that would be to study fire and EMS facility needs for the future. And that the village board of Cottage Grove would be asked to take the lead on putting it together. Then both boards would review this RFP before it came back to the fire commission.
Correct.
Correct. That we'd have the final kick at the can.
And the goal would be to have the RFP agreed upon and presented here by the next meeting, which would be June 23rd.
Yes.
That's a long motion.
Put together well.
So read that.
We get to start to. Do we have a second?
I would second.
I'm sorry, I missed who, Peter and Heidi.
Essentially, I made a motion to commission a study at the Village of Cottage Grove level for both boards to review. Come back here on the 24th.
Third.
No, 23rd, yes, thank you.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Does everybody understand what the motion is?
Yes.
Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Next item. Discuss and consider staffing plan for 2026 to include pay per call.
So that's the next memo in the packet, something we talked about with Cameron and Kim as well. And I have a rough breakdown of what we think would cost based on different plans. I think I got an email from Cameron today talking about how feasible it is for the village side. It sounds like from your email that it wouldn't be possible to start something like this till July of 2026.
I think when I'm looking at it at this point of the year and not knowing everything that's going into the budget cycle, my thought when you kind of go from 0 to 100 like this, it's easier for it to be absorbed in the budget if we're only going up 50% one year, which is half the year, and then 100% the rest of the year. I know that math's not going to work out perfectly because there's obviously a stipend cost or a carrying cost. That's certainly one option. As I'm not on either boards, I'm not here to make a decision, but if come budget time, I had mentioned that we'll have roughly $100,000 to $125,000 in total for the village. And so the village's estimated increase would be about 48,000 just on our side. So that doesn't include increases for EMS or other village services. So one of the things I had mentioned to April and Nick was it could be challenging to do it all in 1 year as opposed to an incremental approach. There certainly, as we get closer to budget time, we could kind of play with that where it could be maybe 3/4 of the year, depending on how other budget requests come in, could be a quarter of the year. And it also kind of waiting to get some feedback from Kim too, to see operationally, how does it fit in the town's finances as well?
Based on the sharing methodology, the protocol, what is the ratio approximately on operating for village versus?
Roughly 65.
2/3, 1/3, give or take. Just looking at it, just.
Yeah, and we're probably going to be closer to 70 this year, with an exponential increase in 27.
So when you look at the paid per call based on the 2024 data, we're saying it goes to $114,000 versus the previous budget of $41,000. So the increase is what? $73,000, and we pay 70 for that. When you're coming up with 50, that's for the full year. 50 grand.
Yeah.
So you're saying
we only do half the year. There's still a cost of I think the roughly 46,000. but it does mitigate that to some extent.
Yeah.
I also, part of the reason why I mentioned that too is I also wanted to make sure that the LoSA stayed on the table. So if we want to fund that, plus this, everything's kind of we're working within finite resources.
Totally.
So, and I definitely want to make sure that the volunteers get
Yeah.
some recognition and reward.
Which one's more important in your mind, LoSA or?
I mean, they both have benefits.
Yeah.
So, I mean, either one.
But this is, this the thing that we're considering now is gonna go a lot in the facility studies as well, right?
So I think we're talking about two different things. I think facilities is one study. I know PAA referenced once you go on an on-call model, it changes it a little bit. So whether or not the boards want to continue with kind of the PAA guidance or commission kind of a study with the facilities to kind of direct that. But I think it's like roughly page 46 or 47 on the on PAA. They recommended once you went on an on-call model, it would become a municipal service. Again, that's just what the PAA study says. And I think this what's being proposed here is a little different. So certainly something that the boards could consider looking at, possibly kind of refreshing that study to see if those recommendations are still accurate.
Nick had a question down below at the very bottom. It's got total cost based on options above 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I understand everything across until I get to the column before the minus 21, 120, which is the current stipends, right? 125, 126, 121, 114, and 123. What is different there?
I think the 21 was, he was trying to eliminate some of the current stipend by eliminating.
Yeah, I understand. So the 110 is fire chief, 75 is fire prevention officer, 34 is associated benefits. Then there's that fourth number, I don't know what that is. Then the minus 21, 120 is taken off the stipend pay because it goes away, right? Between the chief and the inspection.
Yeah.
So that's the minus 21. What is that? The five numbers that are different, those five options, because it's not clear to me.
Those 5 options. So just, I think you're looking at, we had 5 different ways that we could pull the data to create a paid on or a paid per call model. And that's in a different sheet. And I don't know if that was, yeah. So there was 5 different ways to pull the data and we ended up just providing the best way to do it. I think that's what those 5 options are.
That column is for the paid per call, which is the 140.
Yeah, I don't have the sheets in front of me. I'd have to look and make sure I'm telling you the right thing. So I'm sorry.
The question I got there is, so this is 28 and 29. So we're talking in the future. But
yep.
The 110 for the chief,
okay.
5 for the fire prevention officer, that's included in that fourth column. The 114, option 4 is the one you talk about up above, 114. Well, that includes the stipends, right?
In 28 and 29, stipend pay should be removed from the salaries. Like the chief and the fire prevention officer would no longer be receiving stipend pay. That would get eliminated from their salaries because there'd be no reason for them to get that anymore because they're being salaried staff. So you eliminate that and deduct it, and then that would go, basically you would get that back, if that makes sense.
Okay, because the 114 is rounded up from above, that includes stipend, but the 21, 120 takes it out. Okay, I got it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep.
So there, the future, like the longer term staffing plan, could be part of the study as well. I mean, some of the PAA stuff is, similar but different from, like, how do we make this all together as,
Well, I guess for me, part of it is I don't necessarily want to combine two studies. I don't want to, it's going to be like potentially,
It's
I would
messy.
put it oil and water. And because you got two different sides here and expressing an opinion. And if we're going to do a study, let it stand on its own merits. And I'm not saying we forget about PAA, but I think we put the reliance on the PAA study down below, you know, just, yeah, it just, too many cooks spoil the broth. You know, I hate to use an old adage like that, but,
It's gonna be a cleaner study if it does, you start layering all this stuff on, it's just gonna get
but
and
there's,
things have changed since 22 also.
true.
but
And
the
again,
thing,
I mean, this was kind of just intended to get people to start thinking about it, because around that time, the workload's gonna be pretty significant for, I mean, it's already pretty significant for a volunteer to be running the department, doing all the calls that come in, inspections that have to be done, everything that goes along with it. But as it continues to grow, that's gonna be a spot where, is this really something a volunteer should be doing anymore? Or is this now grown into a career spot? And, you know, again, this was all intended kind of to just get people to start thinking about, like, the fire department's gonna have to start changing here, and it's gonna cost a lot to change. So let's get it on the radar now, start thinking about it, and try to come up with solutions that, so nobody's caught off guard, I guess. That's kind of where we're at.
And I really appreciate all the work that Nick and April did. This was a request of mine. As we look to see how the village is growing and what that impact is, this helps guide those decisions on what we need to, how we at least need to be preparing for that.
yeah, I totally agree. And I think that this is, you know, the type of forward-looking planning that we have to have. But then, of course, there's the portion that will be the agreement between our two municipalities, and how, you know, the hiring of, you know, a fire chief looks, and like, you know, there's this other portion in tandem. What does our agreement look like, to work with Cottage Grove Fire Department and between the two of us, and how that's represented, and, you know, the pay structure, you know, we've modified that over time, but is that a static, you know, as we look into the future and the village is, you know, 90%, like how does this, you know, the way the organization operates, the fire organization, and the way our agreement operates is kind of how we support you and our agreement with each other and supporting you, like, you know, that's the other portion that has to be figured out.
And Cameron kind of alluded to it too, like when you start talking about hiring staff, you may have to start reconsidering the structure of the fire department. I mean, right now we're a 115 or 118 department, which means that we're technically a contractor that provides contracted services to the municipalities. We're not your employees. We just contract for you guys. When you start talking about employees, there's two different options. One, the association that is the contractor could hire the employees and you guys just continue to pay us a contracted rate like we have been. Or you guys change and make it a municipal department where the municipalities are paying the employee. And I mean, there's benefits to each side, but that's another thing that has to be looked at, like you said, and there's a lot of stuff that has to go into this. So trying to get it on the radar early so that some of this stuff can happen before it's like, okay, now suddenly we're way behind the ball. There's too much to figure out and nobody has the money to do it. So, you know, that's kind of what this is all about.
Yeah, the fire protection agreement between the two communities is what needs to be, because it refers to nothing about employees. So as far as a stipend though, that's not an employment arrangement, right?
No, so basically what's happening right now is the firefighters all get paid for the trainings that they come to and the Sunday duties they come to. And then the officers and the chief gets paid allotment because all the officers have extra tasks that they have to do, like one oversees the inspection division. There's a bunch of different titles. So they get paid a monthly stipend to help cover some of that extra work they have to do.
And so this model would require a lot more bookkeeping and such. So that, that's another consideration.
Yep.
I'm not sure what the capacity, right, because you're currently fiscal agent, like what is the capacity, like how this impacts a lot of different pieces, so.
Sure.
Really, the only incremental is the apparatus crew pay per call and the station crew pay per call. Everything else is the same, right? It's just different numbers, right?
Yep.
Okay. But who does the other work right now as far as accounting? Is that April or?
The accounting for the association, we have an accountant, so we use Kim Sales for some of it,
Kim
and then we
Sales.
have a payroll service that we're using for the people that get paid.
I would like to express an opinion with regards to, and we're talking years ahead now. The fire department, correct me if I'm wrong, for the city of Sun Prairie and their fire district, all right? Services are provided by Sun Prairie Fire Department, Inc. It's a very secretive organization.
It used to be.
Well, it's
So
It's municipal.
it's municipal now. It was up until about a year ago. They went to a municipal model. Now they are municipal, so there
Okay.
is no more. They still have the volunteer or the Inc. side where they use some fundraising, but they no longer hire, they no longer employ the vets. They're all municipal employees.
I'm glad to hear.
So they got rid of that model.
It was highly secretive organization. They wouldn't share the books, nothing, and even when asked. So having had previous association with that organization, I would prefer to see, knowing how bad things can get, not that I'm inferring anything here, but I would prefer to keep everything as open as we possibly can. And I'm glad to hear that for the city of Sun Prairie's sake, that things are now open and public and so on.
So what's on the table though is kind of talking about 26, 27, changing the stipend and the pay per call, right? That's kind of the discussion that we're having.
Yeah, I think part of this is leading into the conversation that happens in September. So these decisions can't be made in September and actually go into effect in 2026. Because of the dollar amounts that we're talking about, we need to start having these conversations now so we can build this into a sustainable model for the budget for 2026. Because these are significant dollar amounts and these are significant investments into each community. So this allows this dialogue. And really I looked at this agenda item as kind of a discuss and consider, direction for Nick in the 2026 budget document. If he brings you asking for a certain amount of dollar amounts and you're seeing a 200 or 150% increase, it's already been talked about. There's already kind of preliminary board support. So then when he comes and presents to both committees, we won't have issues on approving a final budget with those changes. Or there's not one community that has that thinks we should go full on call, and then the other that's half year, and then we end up in October trying to rush to get a budget to get there.
You're saying what's in here for 26 is approximately an increase of $71,000 for all, 9 items, right? Including the pay per call. 71,000 split 70-30 between the two communities, right? So we're saying $49,000 for the village for the full year and $20,000 for the town for the full year. And you're saying that's too big of an increase?
I can't say definitively at this point in time because there's EMS negotiations this year, there's fire or police negotiations for the village this year. And then there's this on the table, and then obviously our costs. So I think this is getting overall consensus with each board. So going back to the board, having a conversation, is this something that you'd like presented in a proposed budget? Then Nick and April can bring forward either like if it's this one, July 1st or all year, or we're only gonna do the LoSA benefit this year. But just because there's so many variables, trying to get Nick some guidance as he's pulling together a budget for 2026.
But the 13.5 for LoSA would be split 70-30 as well.
Yep.
Approximately, right? Okay. So this would be something that each board would have to review, right?
Yeah, I think
But this
each
board
board should
has
have
to
a
agree?
discussion and come back and give Nick some guidance.
I mean, it's a challenge to make sure we have enough people responding and, whatever we can do to help compensate
Yes.
them and their, sacrifice to help, keep our community safe. But we also have to figure out how to implement it in our finances. So, do we need?
Given the other things that we've talked about, we've thrown a lot of things around. This seems like a very small amount to squeeze in terms of the village side personally, for the importance of retention and a department that's been 100% volunteer up until this point.
I agree.
Which one? The LoSA or the?
Well, the LoSA's
Or both.
70% of, it's like $8,000, right? Plus, I mean, I'm not gonna say it's not a lot of money, but we throw $130,000 at the library initiative. We're talking about $125,000 for a park that wasn't even in the budget, right? And here we're talking 6 months or 5 months before budget time, about $50,000 for a critical emergency service. To me, to kick it 6 months down, I think we owe it to the volunteers that we get a little more serious about.
Well, we do have levy limits to operate under.
Totally get it, but we got other choices that we can make. So what's more important?
Well, we're not talking about additional budget items in our levy for those items, but, we do have police negotiations
I
and
understand.
EMS
I understand.
negotiations. So, we have to think about what's going to be in front of us.
I agree, and the EMS is at the crux of, they're doing a minimum 8 calls a day. So I think providing adequate resources is essential to keep up with the growth. And I can't, way more about the predictions and who knows what's going to happen in the future, but.
But from the village finance perspective, you're recommending that we look at a mid-year for 26 start.
I would recommend at a minimum a mid-year, and I think we could let things settle. And as we get closer, we can certainly be more aggressive about maybe a three quarters of a year. It just is just going to depend on how kind of everything shakes out for the rest of the year, what our final net new construction is compared to what our estimates are. I guess just to put this into comparison, the town had $10,000 of net new construction. So
It's gonna be a lot harder for the town, right?
and that's why I'm trying to have those conversations with Kim beforehand
Yeah.
and making sure that ultimately we're not recommending something that we can fund if we're not going to be able to have support.
Yeah, it's gotta be joint, right?
There's one question, kind of it's related, but I'm gonna take 6 steps back. What does VFIS charge for their services on that compensation for the retirement end of things? Do you know?
That'd be something we'd have to get to. We're trying to figure out the parameters of what makes somebody eligible. We can find out about the cost too. I don't know off the top of my head though.
Were they the only providers for that service?
No, I think we were just thinking the VFIS because we're already using them for all of our insurance. So it's like, just use the same company we're already using rather than start over.
And I guess given the number of changes too, just because the budget has historically been talked about September, maybe, I don't know what's even realistic with April and your team, but maybe it's brought up in July for the first time. So there's a couple months to workshop that and get consensus just because of the change we're talking about.
It's a good idea.
I would look at also other vendors.
There's only one other vendor in the state of Wisconsin, and it's Provident. I don't know anybody that's using that one. There's hundreds of departments in Wisconsin that do this program, And I think almost every single one is using VFIS's program.
I have no doubt,
67
but people are gonna ask, let's compare apples to apples and, seeing it's a considerable amount of money, just have another perspective. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with BFIS or anything. So. So do we actually even want to take any action on the staffing plan to include paper call other than just, we all in agreement that we just take it back to our respective boards?
Yes.
And
include it in our budgeting approach and try to align on something that works for both communities.
Is July realistic for bringing a draft budget back for you guys?
I think we could
Like,
probably-
obviously, there could be a working document, but just an initial one with these
I
considerations.
think we could do an initial one by July, yeah. I mean, it might not be the final one, but yeah, we could start there.
Whatever, if there's anything, just let me know.
Sure.
all right. Discuss and consider changes to the Pleasant Springs contract boundaries.
So we're running into an issue here with the, with Pleasant Springs agreement. So the first page of this is what the comm center, the communication center, the CAD is pulling up for what the boundary is. Second page is what the contract shows it is. And what's happening is like, there's places that are in our contracted area that Stoughton's getting called for, and there's places in Stoughton's area that we're getting called for because they're not following the right map. So realistically, we discussed with the comm center, the easiest thing would have been to just have them take the contracted map and put it in the CAD, but they won't do that.
Why?
Because the current map that Pleasant Springs is using divides parcels, and they don't want to do that. They think that that's not a good idea to divide parcels. So we sat down with Chief Rip from Stoughton and Chief Lang and came up with a line, which is on the last page, which would incorporate the area without dividing parcels anymore. So Chief Rip likes this map, Chief Lang does, we do. And it would be a way that we could fix the boundary agreements with Pleasant Springs, and we wouldn't have to reopen the contract. We could just implement the new map because Stoughton's fine with their portion, we're fine with our portion. But before we did any changes like that, I felt like the board needed to approve it. And then we could give a detailed map to Pleasant Springs, which Faith is actually here tonight. For those of you that don't know, Faith sits she's on Pleasant Springs board, so she's our liaison for the fireside. So we could clean this up and give them a detailed map, and then if they approve it, then the communication center won't change it without it coming from the clerk. So the Pleasant Springs clerk would have to request this change. But we feel like it's the best way to fix the boundary agreement without, I guess, messing it all up and having to renegotiate a new contract. It would straighten out the lines. And a lot of these changes, like most of these parcels are farm fields. So like the house is up near Koshkanon Road, but like the parcel extends all the way down because it's a farm field. So it's really not gonna change the makeup of the calls really. It'd be pretty minimal, but it at least would be like the farmer, if his house is on fire, wouldn't have to call the Cottage Grove Fire Department, or if his school was on fire, it wouldn't be the Stoughton Fire Department. It'd be the same fire department for their entire parcel.
You've already encountered that on Koshkanon Road with that big fire a year ago, the hay fire that we ended up having also. I don't know how many municipalities responded because it was horrific.
Yeah.
And that was because the house was on the north side of the road, they're calling from there. So Deer Grove is coming, but the parcel was on the Stoughton side, and they're responding, everybody's responding, but nobody knew who technically initially was in charge. That's where it fell apart. And then, but then people stepped up and they, worked together. Chief Rip worked with Chief Archibald and they got it all taken care of. But that's where this all came out of. Who takes care of what side of the road? That was my understanding for years. North of Koshkanon was Cottage Grove Fire, and Deer Grove EMS south of it was Stoughton. But that's really not how it was flying. And at the 911 call center, they were even more confused.
So is Pleasant Springs okay with the redrawn map?
No, not yet, because Dick has been ill. And we got an email last week. Dick was hospitalized. And I got the email, Dick got the email to meet with Chief Rip and Archibald and talk and bring in 911 and have a meeting and get us all on the same page. So I said, it's drug out this long. I think it can drag another month, sadly, because it came up last fall, and now we're finally getting something done. And Dick is not real well right now, and just being the liaison, I'm not the chairman. I can't push this so I can bring it back. I was going to ask Dick today if he had any thoughts, but I decided I wasn't going to bother the man. He's in a lot of pain right now. And they haven't figured out what's wrong. So I'd like to approach you people to please let us have another month to work and get Dick to find out what's wrong and to move forward. If that could be agreeable, please.
Do you want a motion to table this then? Or you want to table this then?
We haven't met to discuss it. We can't do a thing.
Well,
I can't speak to it.
No, I understand that, but I guess if we were to give it our stamp of approval
Right, that would be
based
fine.
upon the chief's recommendation, yeah, and then we just send it down to Pleasant Springs, get them to bless it, and then they can send it up to the 911 center, and
Yeah, I mean, you can make it.
because it doesn't even have to go to the boards. I mean, this is something that we don't need the village board or the town board to do this. It's just,
You could just approve it contingent on the review of Pleasant Springs and their
Yeah.
approval. And if they have other changes, then we can come back and rediscuss, but it's up to you guys.
That's my motion.
motion by Duplay to approve the proposed boundary map contingent upon Pleasant Springs acceptance.
I will second that.
Second by Peter. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carried.
Thank you.
Send our well wishes to your chairman.
Thank you.
Figure it out soon.
All right, next item, discuss and consider the meeting date and agenda items. Well, we know the 23rd is the meeting.
What time?
6:30.
I would prefer 6:30.
It would be normal time. The only reason we asked for it to be earlier today is because we have training and we're short-staffed. So I was trying to get out a little bit earlier to meet up for that.
I thought it was late.
It went
Oh, thank
later.
God.
It went later. So I'm sorry, it's just the best late plans.
Add the length of service awards, we'll bring that back up again. The Knox box situation.
Draft RFP,
Your survey?
I'm sorry,
the draft RFP.
yes.
And the Pleasant Springs contract,
No, I don't think it's,
you don't want it?
I mean, if Pleasant Springs,
No, that's
yeah, I know,
fine.
I'm just saying, I don't think so. I mean, I'm open. But I mean, if Pleasant Springs approves it, Nick can take it and run with it. You okay with that?
Yeah.
Okay. And the usual stuff. I would guess it might be premature to bring up the paper call type thing next month. I mean,
July.
you got a lot of work to do on that.
Mhm.
Anything else?
Move adjourned.
Second.
Non-debatable. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
We're out.
Could I ask that I get copies of things? You suggested I go online. I signed up for that, but I didn't receive anything. And typically what we get from EMS is it's sent to our clerk and to Dick Green, and she refers it out to us from the EMS people. And we'd kind of like to keep that loop going instead of me signing up for email. And then I have to forward it to other people pertaining to the meeting and the agenda. I have no idea what you're discussing other than I followed it tonight.
The agenda and attachments should be on, at least at the village board, or the
I
village
tried to
cottage grove
find it.
website.
Honestly, I'll tell you, I'm not techie.
Oh,
I'm
okay.
not at all. So what they've done over
Another
across
one.
the way, I'll admit it. I'm 74 years old. I'm not a techie person. Anyway, across the
that
way,
gets
they
sent
said the secretary sends it to our clerk. She disseminates it out to Dick and me, and we're all three on the same page.
Why
If that
don't you
could
have your
possibly-
clerk call Kim, because Kim will get all of the stuff, and then Kim,
Okay, you want me to be shot? All right, I'll do that.
why is that?
No,
You
babe,
can't
no,
ask your
no,
clerk
no.
to do anything?
Not a lot. I got the email from Kim today saying she's only got certain hours for the summer. I was thrilled with that. That's the only interaction I've ever got. Fine, I'll ask
No.
Peely to call.
Kim allegedly signed you up to receive the notice, all the agendas that go out from the township.
Oh,
Okay.
okay, I haven't received anything yet.
Okay, I don't know if, I'll look into that.
All right, thank you.
Anything else before I pull the plug?